So great to be with you all this evening. Let me change the view here. Um, yeah, fantastic to be with you here this evening. This week I have my parents visiting, my mom and stepfather visiting from Baltimore. And so we've been touristing a little bit, and San Diego is a nice place to tourist together. So I've been eating a little bit more food than I'm accustomed to. And, but it's been very nice to be with my parents and see them again. So yeah, I have been running these classes in a very ad hoc way for the last 15, 16 months, but then it had been requested to have a more structured sequence of meditations. And so starting last week, I started introducing a formal sequence of meditations that I'd spent a long time training in called the stages of the path. The Tibetan word is lamrim, literally just means path stages. And in the lamrim sequence, there's different ways to frame it. But first, the first meditation, the foundational meditation, is meditation on the preciousness of our human life. And that really is, it's interesting because it's quite close to the meaning of breathing meditation. Breathing meditation in a lot of Asian society, the term for breath and the term for life are closely related. You know, prana in Hindu and Indic cultures, and so forth. So meditation on our precious human life is not too dissimilar to meditating on the breath, and it's one of the meanings that we can derive from breathing meditation. The purpose of that meditation is to encourage us about the good fortune and the opportunity that we have now, and to encourage us to use our life in the most meaningful way that we can. And the second meditation, that normally is a fast follow on that, is meditation on death and impermanence. And this is very central topic to the Buddhist tradition, but it is really central to a lot of spiritual traditions, and it's an uncomfortable topic. Even now, I can feel myself, hesitating and trying to choose my words carefully on this topic of death or mortality, because it's a topic that's not as close at hand in our modern society as it was in a lot of traditional societies. So last night I was reading, a book, and it was covering the change in mortality, how, life expectancy 100 years, little more than 100 years ago, 150 years ago, was 34. Now in the West, it's in the 70s, right? And that life expectancy was mostly due to child mortality. And any large family, it wasn't uncommon to have families of 6, 8, 10, 12 kids. With such a group, it's not uncommon to have at least one of those siblings who died as a child. If you can make it through those first 5 years, most people would tend to live a good long while. But in traditional societies, death is close at hand. We're very fortunate that we're not, that it's not as close at hand, that we often have a chance to live long, healthy lives, but that can make us even more surprised, shocked when it does come to someone we know or love. And it also means that we may ignore these deeper nagging questions about, have I lived my life well? Or, what's going to happen? How long do I have to live? Those questions can be troubling. And, with a Netflix subscription, you can postpone thinking about that for a long time. But they're important questions to cover. And I mentioned that they're very central, certainly to Buddhist philosophy, but to a lot of philosophy. In a lot of European paintings, you'll see like a picture of people holding a skull, right? And like these memento mori and like contemplation of death. There's a scene from, was it Macbeth or Hamlet? Sorry, I'm comfortable exposing my illiteracy, my cultural cultural clumsiness, but not a literature major. Um, so there's two aspects to this. One is death, and the other is impermanence. Death, of course, normally means the death of a living being, the end of life. Impermanence, of course, is what we're experiencing continuously, and the same force in our mind that makes it very difficult and challenging to deal with death also actually makes us pretty clumsy dealing with the constant change and constant impermanence that we're exposed to. You may have heard this expression, live in the present moment, stop thinking about the future and thinking about the past. And this question, one meaning or interpretation of this is that when we think about the past, we think about the future, we tend to think of it as like a timeline, because we've seen these pictures, right? Like a timeline, and you can make a timeline of your own life. You think about the past, and there's a funny thing when you think about the past. Okay, think about, some event in your childhood, and then think about some city on the other side of the world. You're using exactly the same part of your mind to do those two things. You're using your imagination. One's a memory, and the other's maybe a memory or some imagination. We deal with the past. We also deal with the future the same way we deal with anything that we can't see immediately. We use our memory, our imagination. And when we imagine things, it just feels like they exist, right? I can still remember my mom when she was a young woman. Don't. The door is closed, so she won't hear me indicate otherwise. But I still remember how she looked like when she was a young woman. That memory never ages, right? It doesn't get any older, right? I still kind of feel like I'm me, right? I don't really feel like I've aged at all, particularly. The gray hairs might indicate otherwise, but the way we deal with things in our imagination, with our language and imagination closely related, they don't age, interestingly. We think of space and time as being the same. As brilliant as Einstein was, there are philosophers that actually disagree with him on this concept of space-time all being one thing, because there really is a difference between going forward in time and going backwards. There's a lot of things that only go one way in the world, despite all the movies you've seen about time travel. The past is gone, like completely gone like there's nothing left of even a moment ago. Even a moment ago is completely and totally gone, disappeared. What exists now is a product of the past, right? But everything is gone. Our youth is gone, child is gone, past connections, past memories, and so forth. But still, in our mind, we hold on to these things, feeling like they're still present, they still exist in some way. But our mind is tricking us a little bit. And also with the future, we wonder what's going to happen in the future, as if the future is out there, like waiting to hit us. But the future doesn't exist. There is no future. There are no future things. There are potentials in the present, that could unfold like this or like that. There's certain things that are more likely. If I drop an object, I can pretty well predict where it's going to go. I can pretty well predict that it's going to fall and so forth. But the future is just potentials that are sort of latent in the present. And the past is just, the residue, including the residue of memories that we have, again, in the present moment. But that's not the way our mind thinks of things. And that's not the way our mind thinks of things. We don't recognize that we're living in a completely new world moment by moment, but we also don't recognize that this life, but we also, because we feel so permanent for ourselves, we don't it's hard or almost, it's very difficult for us to imagine us ceasing to exist, because we feel like we just are there. And this is what's called permanent grasping. Permanent grasping means holding things to be permanent that are not. Some things are more lasting than others. Metal, um, plaster is more lasting than water, say, flowing. But in a sense, everything, is changing moment by moment by moment. But our mind holds on to these things, grasping at permanence. And so the traditional meditation on this topic is primarily to contemplate this thought, I may die today. And that is a bit like a smack in the face. And you show up for a meditation class, and then somebody says, you may die today. And you say, hey, I want my money back. I thought this was going to be like a spa treatment. What do you mean I may die today? And the point of this is, it is an extraordinarily sobering thought. Now, the point of this coming after the meditation on our precious human life is to make sure that your mind is positive enough and optimistic enough to feel that you can work with this thought of the reality of death without it feeling overwhelming or uncomfortable. So if this overwhelming or uncomfortable is a thought, well, you can go back a step to the meditation on precious human life and just really appreciate the great opportunity we have. And then when you're ready, you can recognize that the opportunity is not going to last forever. And that we live our life, as Elton John said, like a candle in the wind, right? Not just Elton John, Buddha said that as well, for example. So the point then becomes to make our life meaningful, to work, to be careful with our time, to be careful with our thoughts, and think, I want to use my life well without wasting even a moment. And when you contemplate, I may die today, what conclusions will arise from that? I don't know. It's a little bit like this question that I often ask at the beginning of the meditation: what is important now? Right? Every time I ask myself that question, or ask you that question, when I say that, it's always a little bit different, right? The feeling, the thought, what's important now? There's some trends, when I think I may die today, I think, there's practical things like have I written a will. Then there's deeper things like, what is my final wish for this life? For example, for the people I know, for the people around me, what contribution would I like to make? Now, at some point, you run out of the ability to outwardly make a contribution, but there's a with our wisdom, we can come to understand how we can still make a contribution, even if we're not directly communicating with others. So for me, this always presses me to think, who am I really, right? And for me, it really makes me feel, I take refuge, this expression, take refuge, is like look for what makes my mind feel more comfortable. If I start feeling uncomfortable, think I may die today, then immediately my mind goes and looks for what would make me comfortable. So I take refuge in a feeling that I am not truly different from others, that the life that I'm living, the air that I'm breathing, the feelings that I have, and so forth, are not really different from that that's been experienced by any living being, every living being over time. Now, that's just something that works for me, right? But and so at that time, I feel a closeness for others, um, and that in my mind brings an experience of peace. But the main point is just to contemplate um, the reality of our death. So this meditation has two aspects: our own death and impermanence, mortality, but as well the reality of change. And the main point is to actually spend time with this thought and see what comes up and see what you think and see how it unfolds. And again, like I said, when you introduce an idea like this, what will unfold from your mind? It varies a bit, right? It depends, and it's not necessarily ever the same. Um, but the point is, it should be closer to um, closer to the truth or closer to reality, right? Like when we acknowledge a reality like that, like death, there is uh, there is power in that knowledge. There's power in that wisdom. There's power in not hiding from that topic, not ignoring that topic. There's psychological, mental power in that. So, okay. I've given a longer prelude. So what I'd like to do is this is sort of turn things around again with a little bit more longer intro. And so what we can do now is meditate. We'll do, as usual, some meditation on the breath, but as we breathe, we can recognize the impermanence of our body, that our body is never the same from one breath to another, right? And as well, we can begin to meditate on the gross, that's the subtle impermanence, that it's changing moment by moment, breath by breath. But the gross impermanence is knowing that this body is like a candle flame in the wind, that it's fragile and impermanent. And so, and then we can contemplate this thought, I may die today, and meditate on whatever feelings arise with that. So, and if this is uncomfortable, then again, we can just do a simple breathing meditation, really as you prefer and as is comfortable. But really, this is our opportunity to explore. Nobody's ever died from doing this meditation that I'm aware of. So it is actually, even if it's thoughts like this are scary, you know, this is basically this is dealing with reality, and that's good for you. So, okay. So we can sit as usual, just still, quiet, chance to gather our thoughts and energies. Closing our eyes, we can reduce our outer distraction. We take a deep breath in and out. And another breath, inviting ourselves to relax. And again, we can ask ourselves, what is important now? And for a while, we can just sit and focus on our breathing. We can ask ourselves, where did our past breaths go? Where do our future breaths come from? Does such a question even make sense? As we focus on our breath, feeling of our body, we can also feel this subtle impermanence. Body is changing breath by breath, beat by beat. Our breath brings oxygen, which fuels the inner fire of our metabolism. Just like a flame needs oxygen to burn, so we need oxygen constantly. And when our breathing stops, this candle flame like life will come to an end. And just as candle flame is extinguished, so too our life will be extinguished. Death is a final end. The question is, a final end to what? What is, who are we? What is our life? We can just contemplate, I may die today. My life is so fragile. You never know what might happen. Death will definitely come. We have no idea when, and we may even die today. And then we can bring to mind all of the people in our life who have helped us to be here now: parents, friends, colleagues, even strangers who've helped us one way or another, animals, and so forth. We can feel them around us and imagine that they are also gaining this realistic awareness of death. We know that some of them may have even passed away. We imagine everyone gaining this realization of impermanence, overcoming this sense of permanent grasping. With the feeling of gratitude, we can reflect on our time here, this brief meditation, and recognize that we have deepened our wisdom, deepened our inner peace, our insights, walked along inner pathways that will gradually deepen and strengthen into lasting realizations that can also influence our society and people around us. The real danger is not death, it is dying unprepared, living, wasting this precious opportunity that we have now. Then, with this recognition, we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation.